Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope we're all doing well. Today we're going to be doing a reaction video. I've never done one of these before on my channel, but I figured, since I love the Elder Scrolls, and sorry for the black screen, I promise I'll because it started playing, like almost like pretty much immediately, and I had to kind of stop it and bring it back to zero. Um, but yeah, so one of my favorite things to kind of like look over is the Elder Scrolls lore. And maybe I'll do a little bit of Warhammer or whatever you guys want, right? So, and look, I'm sure the algorithm will love me. I don't think it will. um but yeah, so I love the Elder Scrolls lore just as much as the next man and or the next person or whatever. I remember when I first got into the Elder Scrolls lore, it was very much I think I just started playing Skyrim. I played Skyrim back in 2011. I didn't get into the lore probably around 2016, probably right around when I got my Xbox One, which is a horrible console. I still have it, but still. Overall, I got to know channels like Fudgemuppet, which you can see, right here, and everything. So, yes, Fudgemuppet, I got into their lore. Imperial Knowledge is another channel. I haven't really gotten into Daraloth, but I do want to check him out eventually, and I'm sure he won't mind me reacting to his stuff, and everything like that. So, but yeah. I think that's pretty much it for the most part. Let me know down in the comment section below if you want me to react to more lore stuff, whether it be Warhammer, whether it be Lord of the Rings, whether it be Elder Scrolls, or whatever have you. As long as it's not music. As long as it's not music, I think we'll be fine. And so, but yeah, I'm really excited for this. Today we're going to be taking a look at Pelinal Whitestrake Explained, Slayer of Elves and Leader of Men, Elder Scrolls lore. But yeah, I don't know what I'm going to call this video. Who knows? But seeing as how I know a little bit about the lore, maybe I don't know if they'll explain it. Well, it's been a while since I've watched this video. I don't know if I can't remember if they do explain a little bit, or do explain a little tidbit about Pelinal Whitestrake. But I know they'll go into like a little bit of more detail. So anyways, without further ado, let us begin. 3, 1, 2, 3. Hold on. Let me actually turn down the music because music's kind of loud and it's kind of overpowering my mic a little bit. Go down to around 10. No. 40, there we go. I love the Oblivion music, man. It's so nostalgia. Hold on. Now my mic is peaking. I am so sorry. I don't know why let me see here. Go down to 2, I think. No, 6. La 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 la. Okay, that's better. Give me un momento second, guys. Should have done this before the video. Oh well. You know what?
He was Pelinal the Whitestrake because of his left hand, made of a killing light. He was Pelinal the Bloody, for he drank it in victory. He was Pelinal Insurgent because he gave the Crusades a face. He was Pelinal in Triumph, as the words eventually became synonymous. And men-at-arms gave thanks to the Eight when they saw his banner approaching. He was Pelinal the Blamer, for he was quick to admonish those allies of his that favoured tactics that ran counter to his sword theory. And he was Pelinal the Third, because some said he was a god geyser who had incarnated twice before already, and because he was the third vision given to Alesia in her prayers of liberation. It was a time of great peril in the heartland of Cyrod. To be human was to be condemned to brutal enslavement, deep within the Aelid citadels. No.
I don't know if Phil mentioned this, but I'm pretty sure he will. But sorry, and I just so you know, because of fair use and everything that goes on with that, I will be pausing it a lot. But I will try not to pause it as much. Essentially, the Aelids were probably one of the more crueler elven races in Elder Scrolls history. I won't go into too much detail, but I'm sure if you figure it out, like they basically hunted people for sport, women, men, children, the whole 9 yards. I won't go like I said, I won't go into too much detail, just because it can get a little brutal. But just keep that in mind.
For their magnificence and timeless beauty, the Nedic peoples saw not splendour, only horror. The artistic innovations of the Aelid elves remains unrivaled to the modern day, but as their hubris flourished, their capacity for mercy withered. In pursuit of brilliance, it was the men who suffered. The slaves toiled away every waking hour to build monuments of Aelid greatness, and when they were done, they were tortured for sport and pleasure. The blood of the slaves spattered the walls they themselves had built. Those needs who were not bent beyond breaking point by the labour or torn to pieces of sinew and viscera by the torture, spent their sleepless nights praying for escape. But for the longest time these prayers would go unanswered, until a young woman with no name, enslaved within the Aelid city of Sard, bowed her head in prayer. She beckoned the Aedra to liberate the humans from the Daedra-worshipping Aelids. She spoke to the Handmaiden of Kine, who is Mara in the Nordic pantheon, and the Handmaiden granted her divine visions. She saw Kine's son, the demigod Morahouse. He was a mighty and snorting, gore-horned winged man-bull, who would...
So one of the things that I don't think cool thing about, one of the cool things about Fudgemuppet's earlier videos is that the fact that there were 3 of them, right? If you know anything about Fudgemuppet and everything, there were 3 individuals running this channel. There was Scott and Michael, which I think they were Australian or New Zealand, or I can't remember. I think they were Australian. And then there was Drew, which I think was European. I actually can't remember, but yeah. But then eventually, I think it was like last year or the year before. Either way, he eventually left and started his own channel. But regardless, what I wanted to say was that Morahouse, and I'll probably dabble into another video explaining this, but essentially her and Alesh, or Alesia, which is a more corrupted version of Alesh, fell in love, which is why you see a lot. Well, and I could be wrong about this, but let me know that in the comment section below. But essentially, like, that's how the Minotaurs came to be, essentially, or at least the descendants of them. Yeah, so this just like going in along with that, Alesia basically fucked the bull. So I find it like ironic, but anyways.
Be her lover, and he would help her rally other slaves to her rebellion. And then came a vision depicting the one who would lead her armies. He was shown to her as a diamond soaked red with the blood of elves. This diamond would transform into a man whose every edge and angle could cut down her...
And that diamond was supposedly the Amulet of Kings, who ended up basically becoming his heart, essentially. So it was a gaping hole with the diamond, with the Amulet of Kings wedged inside as a heart. So, yeah.
Jailers. He was arrayed in armour so perfectly crafted that it must have been from the future, and his name was Pelinal, the Star-Made Knight. He walked into the jungles of Cyrod already killing more.
So, and I do apologize for keep pausing, but essentially, Pelinal is an elven name, which is kind of like ironic given like the nature of who Pelinal is and everything. So, um, but yeah, some say he was a time. I'm sure he'll mention this in the video, but it's like he was basically a time traveling cyborg from the future or something along those lines.
House the man-bull stamping at his side, froth bloody and bellowing from the excitement, because the Pelinal was come. Hey guys, it's Drew here and welcome back to Fudgemuppet. The subject of today's video is potentially my favourite in the entire Elder Scrolls universe. This character is steeped in ancient folklore, passed down by countless generations, embellished by scores of sweet-talking storytellers and starry-eyed singers. His story hails from the Malefic and early First eras, and it's near impossible to separate the fact from the myth. But that's what makes his story so engrossing. Was he just a man devoted to saving the races of men from the oppression of the elves? Was he an avatar of the Aedra, sent to Tamriel by divine light to carry out the will of the gods? Or is he something else entirely, like a time-travelling cyborg, returning to the past to fix the future? Whatever he is, we'll know all there is to know about him by the end of this video. For now we have a story and a name, Pelinal Whitestrake. This nameless woman who had convened with the Aedra was successful in gathering rebels for her cause. With numbers at her back and two divine heroes promised to arrive, there would be no better time than now to strike at their elven jailers. And her vision soon came to fruition as Pelinal and Morahouse arrived at the nameless woman's camp of rebels. Whitestrake held his sword and mace, both encrusted with the smashed viscera of elven faces, feathers and magic beads, which were the markings of the Eladune, stuck to the redness that hung from his weapons. Pelinal lifted his weapons before the congregation of slaves and said, "These were their eastern chieftains, no longer full of their talking." Such an intimidating sight would have been catharsis to the Needs. Many of them would have been born in captivity, and those who weren't born in the citadels would have watched their homes burn when the Aelids and their Daedra armies came to take their lands and enslave their families. To many of the slaves, this would have been their first sight of elven blood, a welcome change to the blood of human slaves that was so liberally spilled.
And that's another thing, right? It's when Pelinal first arrived, right? So Alicia got 3 visions. One was her rebellion, the other was Morehouse, the other was Pelinal. At least I think that was the first one. And he essentially wiped out, like, over time, obviously, the entire left half. Like if you open like a map of Cyrodiil, right, and you go to the left or to the right, right? If you're looking at a map straight on and you're going to the right, that whole section across this the river or whatever, he completely wiped that out. And it was kind of like, oh my. So by the time he got to the camp, right, he was like, oh yeah, by the way, I wiped out most of the elves on the right side. So, something to think about. He did this over time. He didn't do it all at once, but he did it over time. And I think, if you think about it, like, if you think about it, it's like, on one hand, like, at first they're arrogant. It's like, who is this Pelinal Whitestrake? Why is he doing these things? But then it becomes more or less, oh shit, this guy can actually hurt us and, doesn't give a damn and stuff like that. So anyways, moving on.
By their oppressors. It was around this time when she had acquired a sizable following that the nameless woman became their leader and their slave queen. Eventually, later in this story, she would be given a name. They would call her Alesh, which means High Highness, for they were awestruck by this woman who could talk to gods and bring hope to the hopeless masses of men. The name Alicia was a corruption of this title that evolved over time. The legends hold that Alicia's visions were given to her at the ancient citadel of Sancretor, and when the rebellion claimed this fortified city, Alicia established her holy city there. From here, Saint Alicia and her slaves began their open revolt against the slave masters. Pelinal Whitestrake's first elf blood-soaked impression upon the slave rebels was striking, and they soon saw that he was exactly what the goddess Kyne had promised. In those early days, Pelinal was the enemy of all elf kind. While his conflicts with the Aelid elves would be his legacy, it is documented in the book Before the Ages of Man that he wandered Tamriel long before he was sent to aid Saint Alicia in the Heartland. This book was written by the ultimate author Icontair of Shimmerine, and it may well have been simply propaganda for the Aldmeri Dominion, because he was in fact the leader of indoctrination for the First Dominion. Despite this possibility, his work is generally accepted to be credible, and this particular book presents the major events of the Dawn and Malefic eras, with some measure.
I just love how I love the cinematics of Fudgemuppet. I always have. I just love that he this is so lore accurate, to Pelinal. How he's just covered in blood, but yes.
Of impartiality. The book says, during the late Malefic era, the legendary immortal hero, warrior, sorcerer and king, variously known as Pelinal Whitestrake, Harold Hairy Breeks, Ismir, Hans the Fox, etc., wandered Tamriel, gathering armies, conquering lands, ruling, then abandoning his kingdoms to wander again. This quote tells us two things. Firstly, it is suggested that Pelinal had multiple aliases, and each of these, Harold Hairy Breeks, Ismir and Hans the Fox, are believed to be Shezarines. The Shezarines were a group of famed heroes and avatars that popped up throughout Tamrielic history, each bearing a connection to Lorcan, aka Shazar, the missing god. Whether the Shezarine is a manifestation of Shazar himself, or simply a champion of Shazar, is uncertain, but it is certain that these heroes possessed supernatural ability.
So, for those of you who don't know, Lorcan, during the Dawn era, essentially was like, hey, I want to create something for men. There were two different types of people. There was the wandering Elmnephe and the which would become men, and the old Elmnephe, which would become elves. Lorcan essentially said to the Aedra, Ariel, and all those guys said, hey, I want to create a realm, that's for everybody. And Ariel accepted. He accepted, and he accepted. And unfortunately, and this is where the story kind of becomes convoluted, right? Or depending on who you ask, depending on who you believe. If you're believing the elves, Lorcan is a trickster who tricked the Aedra into making Nirn. And all Magnus leaving and realizing the tricks, the trickster's trick, realizing the trick and the deception, left and created the cosmos and everything like that. And then there is the Nord side of things, the races of men, where they believe that, hey, he saved us from becoming nothing, essentially. Well, at the end of it all, Lorcan chose the side of man, and Trinamak, who was the Aedra's greatest champion, ended up, and there's a whole story to go along with this, and everything, but essentially what ended up happening is that Lorcan got his heart ripped out and by Trinamak himself, and Ariel just was like, and look, I won't go quote for quote, but essentially all you need to know is that they tried to destroy the heart, it didn't work, and so Ariel just shot it with his bow, shot it into the sea where no basically mortal could find it, and that's how Morrowind, Vardenfell was created. So yeah, something to think about.
Many of which will be displayed by Pelinal in this tale. This is where the other explanation for Pelinal's title, Pelinal III, comes in. Some say this name comes from him being Alicia's third vision from the Aedra, while the other accepted explanation is that he was the third incarnation of the Shezarine. The quote also tells us that Pelinal Whitestrake was the bane of all elves, not just the Heartland Aelids. During the late Malefic, early First eras, Tamriel was almost entirely ruled by the various races of Mer. The Chimer and Dwemer occupied occupied Resdain, the Snow Elves were still present in the north. The Doreni hegemony dominated the Iliac Bay, the Aelids held central Tamriel, and the Wood Elves dwelled in the jungles of Valenwood. So for Pelinal to be wandering Tamriel, conquering lands, ruling and abandoning kingdoms, he would have almost certainly been taking these lands from elves. It's entirely possible that he warred with all the elven races of Tamriel, and it seems he actively sought out elves to kill in battle. He was so zealous in his massacring pursuits that it is said that he wiped out a huge chunk of the Khajiit population in Elsewhere, mistaking them for a species of elf. This comes from the Pocket Guide to the Empire, 1st edition, which says, indeed, Pelinal Whitestrake, Nibene warlord of the Elven Pogrom, mistook the Khajiit for another strain of Aldmeri, and killed many of their number before realizing his error. Such sources confirm most suspicions that Pelinal's persecution of the elves was well organised and executed, even before a worthy cause like Alicia's came along. The 8 divines may well have picked their side for the war to come, but the Aelids were by no means cocky. The Aelids had abused slave labour to build their mighty empire, but to underestimate them was foolish. They were undoubtedly one of the greatest civilizations ever to grace the continent of Tamriel, and they wouldn't roll over and take this insurrection lightly. The Aelids were not used to insubordination.
I don't know if he'll mention it, but essentially the Aelids, how they got into power was through Daedra worship. And I'll probably mention this later on if he doesn't mention it. But yeah, so they, and and here's the thing, like Meridia was another Daedra, but she used to be an Aedra. She used to be a Magna Gi, right? A daughter of Magnus, essentially. Well, Meridia, fun fact about her is that the reason she became a Daedra is because she consorted with Daedra, and so Magnus basically cast her out, and that's all that's all that story. But yeah, so that's how the Daedra or the Aelids were able to do all these heinous things and everything of that, because they actually consorted and were with Daedra. That's how they kind of got into power and everything. So things to know.
And such disrespect of their authority provoked retaliation. The Sorcerer Kings of the Heartland planned to utterly demolish the rebellion, leaving no survivors. To show any mercy is to leave potential for a second rebellion to rise from the debris. At Sancretor, Pelinal called out the Aelid king named Haramir of Copper and Tea, and challenged him to a duel. Pelinal ate his neck veins while screaming praise to Riemann, a name that no one knew yet. While many of the onlookers may have been distracted by the gruesome display, those perceptive enough to hear his exclamation must have wondered who Riemann was, and rightly so. This is one of the pieces of evidence used when proposing the idea that Pelinal was a supernatural entity, and perhaps even a time traveller. This was around the 242nd year of the First Era, over 2,400 years before Riemann Cyrodiil was born. He proceeded to duel many other Aelid tyrants. The next was Gordhor, the Shaper, whose head was smashed upon the goat-faced altar of Ninandava.
One of the things, it's actually one of the funnier things. Gosh, I can't remember the reference to it or the source to it, but it was how Riemann was actually born. I guess there was this king who basically made love to a hill and proceeded to well, you can kind of guess where I'm going with this, but essentially he made love to a hill. He ended up dying. The hill grew, and because the whole thing is that he thought he saw Alicia. He thought he saw the slave queen, which had been dead for a long time up to this point. And he thought he saw Alicia, so he made love to a hill, and ended up basically dying right then and there. Fast forward a couple years or so, the hill started to grow, and I guess a couple of pilgrims or travelers or whatever it was. Like I said, I can't remember the exact source, but essentially, this woman found this child, this baby, right? And she picked it up, and I guess he had a amulet of kings on his brow, right? And so brought her back to, the White Gold Tower, or the Cyrodiil, or brought him back to the Imperial City and everything like that. And like no one, from what I understand, no one stopped her from doing this. She basically placed him on the throne, and in a grown man's voice. Keep in mind, this is a baby saying this in a grown man's voice. Saying basically, I am Cyrodiil come, in a grown man's voice. I thought that was funny when you kind of think of the context at the time, but that's how wild Elder Scrolls lore gets. Anyways.
Pelinal then uttered a small plague spell to ensure that the evil Shaper could not use the Aelid Welkind magic to reform. Later that very season, Pelinal tracked down the notorious Fire King. The Fire King Hadhul had likely earned his name from his particularly cruel treatment of Nedic slaves. In his memoirs, Morahouse the Manbull mentions Hadhul. He says that the slaves who were not busy with labour were sometimes given to the hedonistic art torturers. These were the Wailing Wheels of Vindazel, and the Gut Gardens of Cercin, and the Flesh Sculpturers. But these weren't even the worst of the exhibitions, for there were the realms of the Fire King Hadhul, where the begetting of drugs drawn from the admixture of Daedrons into living hosts let one inhale new visions of torment, and children were set aflame for nighttime tiger sport.
There it is there. So yeah, when I mentioned in the beginning of this video where essentially children were hunted, I didn't say it directly, but I'm sure it would have been said. Yeah, Aelids were cruel. They were assholes.
This monstrous despot poisoned his subjects and showed no remorse even for children. But when Pelinal the Bloody ascended the granite steps of Siatar, Hadhul knew the hour of his reckoning had come. Pelinal slew the Fire King on those very steps, and Hadhul's spear finally experienced its first refute. Word of Pelinal the Whitestrake's deeds would have travelled fast, and many of the sadistic kings were surely embracing the unfamiliar feeling of humility. Their odds of escaping justice were shrinking by the day, and they were surely praying overtime to their Daedra lords now. For a time, no Aelid weapon could pierce Pelinal's armour, and this was because it was not crafted by mortals. Pelinal's duels against the Sorcerer Kings would be sung about for centuries, but he was not all.
The reason they weren't able to penetrate it is because it was supposedly created by gods. His armor, of course.
Always the embodiment of chivalry, as his rages were infamous. His first madness struck when Huna, a soldier Pelinal had raised from grain slave to hoplite, and loved well, was struck down by an Aelid arrow. Pelinal wrought devastation from Narlame to Celadil, and erased those lands from the maps of elves and men. His destructive ire resonated all the way to the heavens, and Elysia was forced to make sacrifices to the Aedra to keep them from leaving the world in disgust. With Greater Cyrodiil faltering from the deeds of Pelinal and the Elysians, it was time for the rebels to turn their attention to the White Gold Tower, the pinnacle of the Aelid Empire, their greatest monument. The Aelids had prepared for the inevitable battle to come. They made a pact with the Daedric Prince Meridia, the Lady of Infinite Energies. This alliance granted them her legions of Auroran Knights, made from pure light. The golden-hued Sorcerer King, Umriel the Unfeathered, became their champion, for he was half elf, half divine. The alliance granted him immortality, and the promise of rebirth in the coloured runes should he fall in battle. On top of this, the Aelids had discovered a way to damage Pelinal's divine armour using Valiants. The Sorcerer Kings were heavy with Valiants, and Umriel wrought the axes and arrows of the soldiers with long Valiants. It's hard to give an exact definition of Valiants, but it essentially means starlight, the same energy that the Aelids store in their Vala stones. For the first time since his coming, it was Pelinal who was called out to battle by another, for Umriel had the blood of the Atada and would never know death. Pelinal soon drove the sorcerer armies past the Niben, claiming all the eastern lands for the rebellion, and Kyne had to send her rain to wash the blood from the villages and forts that no longer flew Aelid banners. Pelinal broke down the doors of the Aelid prison of Vartak, freeing the slaves while the slave queen flew on her winged bull lover overhead. This was the moment she was called Alesh for the first time, which would eventually lead to the Nedic bastardization of the title Elysia. Pelinal then led the pogrom against the Northern Aelids, returning lands to the Northerners of Falkreath. With the Nords among their ranks, Pelinal led the armies of men into the heart of the hinterland west, driving the Aelids inwards to the Tower of White Gold. Aware of the human armies descending upon them from the northwest, Umariel sent his Thundernarks to thin their ranks. Pelinal crushed them under the might of his mace. However, Morahaus, Breath of Kine, had fallen, wounded by a volley of bird beaks. Pelinal delivered his injured companion to the clever man healer to hasten his recovery. But without their man-bull demigod, Alicia's armies and the legions of Nords shook with fear at the sight of the White Gold Tower. Morale had taken a hammer blow, so much so that even the Slave Queen, emboldened by her triumphant rebellion, decided upon a delay. Pelinal was furious and entered one.
I don't know if he'll mention this, but essentially, when the Nords first arrived, I guess Pelinal was covered in so much blood that the blood actually stained, like, through his helmet, stained his hair, I guess brown or whatever, and was like, and I guess the Nords was like, oh, and I guess they praised him as Shore, and they praised him as Shore, and Pelinal honestly didn't like that, because like if elves were like the number one thing that he hated, gods were second, because he was considered a Shezarene, like an aspect of Shore, and Lorcan hates the gods from what we know, because they ended up killing him. But yeah, so that's kind of like the rundown of it. Like if elves were number one, gods were number two. He tolerated them, but I don't know if he'll also mention this, but essentially, he would go into such a madness, and like Drew did mention Huna. One of the things that kind of got him into madness, right? Like, it wasn't just the fact that he fell in battle. Like, that was like the breaking point. But before that, Pelinal would ask Huna about the scars on his back, or whatever the case was. And when Huna told him how he got the scars, he would go out and he would kill said elves, or said elf, or whatever. Well, when Huna died, obviously, you know what happened. But it got so bad that it took the 8 divines to not. It wasn't just disgust, but it took the 8 divines to calm Pelinal down, because no one could calm him down, right? Once he got into that madness state, no one could calm him down. Alesh couldn't calm him down. Morehouse couldn't calm him down. No one could calm him down. And I don't think even Huna would even try to calm him down. So Alicia ended up praying to, the divines and said, hey, can you calm this guy down so he doesn't run amok? But yeah, so anyways, but like the long story short, going back to the whole Shore thing, Pelinal was disgusted by this and was like, how dare you call me a god? And, because, he didn't like to be compared to them. So just something you should know.
Of his famed bouts of madness, he spat curses at Umariel and at the cowards he saw before him.
Oh, for fun. Oh my god. I knew there was going to be an ad. Hold on. There we go.
And then he made for the tower alone, driven by impulse.
One of the things that I don't have is YouTube Premium. Hopefully, when I start earning money, when I can save enough money and everything, hopefully I'll be able to get YouTube Premium. But until that, you kind of have to bear with me here. So these ones are going to be a little scuffed. Not going to lie.
And an ever-burning desire to spill elven blood. Pelinal marched on the citadel, and in this brief calm before the storm of swords, we can touch on the nature of Pelinal's madness. Even as early as Alicia's visions from Mara, it was clear that Pelinal was not a mortal warrior. In her vision, Pelinal came to her as a diamond soaked red with the blood of elves, and it is said that beneath his star armor lies a chest that gaped open to show no heart, only the blood-red diamond, which sang like a mindless dragon. His actions weren't predictable the way immortals are. One moment he would be speaking to his gathered men, the next he would bellow a laugh, run into the rains of kine and slaughter any elf in the area. Only Alesia could intervene, as she would pray to the gods for aid, and they would reach down as one mind to soothe the Whitestrake until he no longer had the will to kill.
So he did mention it. Well, at least you know now.
The earth in whole. When asked by a comrade what such an affliction felt like, Pelinal responded, like when the dream no longer needs its dreamer. Even Pelinal the Whitestrake, the star-made knight, could be caught in the throes of an existential crisis. Umriel watched from afar as his allies fell to Pelinal's blade. Dead Aurorans littered the battlefield like chips of gold on the riverbank. Only then did Umriel deign to appear before the champion of men. Pelinal was surrounded by the remaining Aelid sorcerer kings, who were all weighed down by potent valiance. The Whitestrake cracked the floor with his mace, sending them back. "Bring me Umriel that called me out," Pelinal said. Aelid and Auroran soldiers continued to strike at his armour, piercing and denting it in numerous places. This pleased Umriel, who was fresh and untested. He appeared shrouded in Meridia's incandescence. The unfeathered champion announced him.
One of the things that I find fascinating, I think it was a Warhammer K, Warhammer 40K. I think it was Horus and what was it? It was the vampire-like guys, right? The hold on. Let me see here. I think it was, let's see. Warhammer 40K. Because I would know them. Blood Angels. Blood Angels. I think they're called the Blood Angels. Let's see. Blood Angels. Let me see here. I think it's called the Blood Angels, right? All right. Let's see. Yeah, red and black. Sanguinous. Yeah, they were vampires. Essentially, I don't know what the reference is, but essentially the leader of the Blood Angels was fighting Horus, much like Pelinal and Umriel. But unlike the leader of the Blood Angels, Pelinal finished the job. And compared to like the Warhammer, where the leader of the Blood Angels fell by Horus. So
himself by speaking outwardly of his father and his kin. All the while, Pelinal sucked in pained breaths, which delighted the gold-clad Umriel. Much of Pelinal's song was lost to time, including any first-hand accounts of the battle itself, but the aftermath is written in great detail. Umriel was laid low, the angel face of his helm dented into an ugliness which made Pelinal laugh, and his unfeathered wings had broken off with sword strokes delivered while Pelinal stood above him, insulting his ancestry and anyone else that took ship from old Elnathay, the elven homeland. This angered the other elvish kings and drove them to a madness of their own, and they fell on him with their weapons, cutting the Pelinal into 8 pieces. The rejuvenated Morrhouse brought Alesia's legion down on the city the next morning, and the tower shook from the tremors caused by the bashing of his horns and the stamping of his hoofs. The men searched for Aelids to kill, but Pelinal left few, only those kings and demons who had fled the previous day's battle. Morahouse wandered the battlefield in the aftermath, and when the White Gold Tower was taken, he found the severed head of Pelinal among the dead in the throne room. The Aelid kings had left it there to prove their deeds, and when Morahouse found the head, the two conversed. In this intimate moment between immortals, not even Alesia intervened. Morahouse wrote of the encounter in his memoirs. Pelinal's head said, "Our enemies have undone me and spread my body into hiding. In mockery of divine purpose, the Aelids cut me into apes, for they are obsessed with this number." And Morahouse, confused, said in response, "Your crusades went beyond her counsel, Whitestrake, but I am a bull, and therefore reckless in my wit. I think I would go and gore our prisoners if you had left any alive. You are blood made glorious, uncle, and will come again, as fox, animal, or light. Cyrod is still ours." And this exchange is another piece of evidence suggesting Pelinal Whitestrake's divine providence. The son of Kine, the demigod Morahouse, calls Pelinal uncle. With the White Gold Tower captured and the Aelid Empire beaten, Alesia declared herself the first empress of the new Cyrodiilic Empire. The people needed a new religion that was familiar to the people of Cyrodiil, used to the elven influence, but also acceptable to the Nords, who were staunchly opposed to elven deities. So one of her first acts as empress was the establishment of the new religion of the new Imperials. She combined aspects of the Aldmerian.
I don't know if he'll mention this. Well, I keep on repeating myself, as a broken record does. But one of the things that he's not mentioning, and I'm sure he'll probably mention this, who knows, maybe he won't. Essentially, when they conversed, Pelinal said, "Hey, Umril's not really dead. He's just injured. So he'll return." Well, Umril indeed returns in the year Third Era 433, which is basically during the Oblivion, the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion at the end of it all. And if you've ever played the Knights in the Nine DLC, you would know that, because here's the thing, it was like, how do I describe it? The first time Umril was defeated, it was 8 divines, right? But he would later return. So you actually you find out later on during the game Oblivion that you would need that you needed all all 9 divines, 9, the number 9, right? You would not 8, but 9. You would need all 9 divines to defeat Umril and send him back to wherever it is he came from. So thank you, Talos, for being the favorite divine. Is all I could say. So but yeah, so that's one of the things that I did want to mention. I don't know if he will mention it. If he doesn't, then you do have that little bit of tidbits. So but yeah, you needed all 9 divines, and back then there wasn't really a Talos to worship. But then when Talos ended up, becoming the 9th divine, Umril was eventually defeated during the events of Oblivion. So
Nordic pantheons, and the religion of the 8 divines was born. Upon Alesia's deathbed, she was visited by Akatosh, the chief god of the divines. She made a covenant with the dragon god, who blessed her with the blood of dragons. So long as she and her heirs remained true to the dragon blood, Akatosh would seal tight the gates of Oblivion. To maintain the covenant, Akatosh gave the Imperials the dragon fires, which must remain lit eternally, and he bestowed upon her the Amulet of Kings, and in death her soul was bound to the amulet. But if the Empire should slacken in its dedication to the divines, or if the blood of Alesia's heirs should fail, then the barriers guarding Tamriel from the Daedric realms would fall. Strangely, the records suggest that Pelinal Whitestrake was present at Alesia's bedside, despite this taking place over 20 years after his death by dismemberment. His final words to Alesia are documented, though fragmented, so it's hard to be completely sure what was said, He mentions his other half, which while vague, could be used as evidence for him being a Shezarene, or the mortal manifestation of Shazar. There is a theory called the Lunar Lorcan, suggesting that the missing god was split in two, and his corpse can be seen in the night sky as the moons Massa and Secunda. Pelinal also alludes to being present in the Dawn era before the convention. It was at this convention that the elven deities Auriel and Trinimac tore out Shazar's heart and shot it across Tamriel. Finally, Pelinal says, "Let us now take you up. We will show our true faces." And with this, Pelinal was tasked with escorting Alicia's soul to the afterlife. Pelinal Whitestrake's legacy lived on long after the blood of elves had washed away. Without him, Alesh may never have succeeded in her rebellion. Morahouse was a mighty warrior, born from Kind's own breath. But to slay Umriel the Unfeathered, garbed in Meridia's brightness, that took another kind of light, the killing light of the Whitestrake's left hand. Even in the songs, pondering the true nature of Pelinal is avoided. His ghost reappeared to the champion of Cyrodiil, who continued Pelinal's legacy by defeating Umriel in his second coming. But I think we can safely talk about Pelinal's true identity now, without being killed by a ghost in a bout of madness. Even when embellished by 1,000 bards, Pelinal's story could not be about a mortal. No man could have such a significant impact on the world. Have you ever heard of a mortal hero born without a heart? A mortal who could converse with his friends as a severed head, with his other body parts strewn around the battlefield. And resurrection can only be truly achieved by the divine, that or by some profane necromancer. But what about the time Pelinal cried out Reman's name after slaughtering a foe, or when he speaks of the Dawn era like it was yesterday? Well, this takes us out of the established canon, but some theories, most of which are supported by the infamous Michael Kirkbride, would assure us that Pelinal Whitestrake is a time-travelling cyborg, sent back in time to fix the future. But there you have it, guys, the full story of Pelinal the Whitestrake, the face of the Crusaders, the blood-soaked diamond. I hope you enjoyed learning about one of my favourite characters in the Elder Scrolls universe. It would be amazing to see the early days of the first era in an Elder Scrolls game, to see just how much is real and how much is dramatised and romanticised. But then again, the way Pelinal's story feels like the story of a mythological hero is part of the charm. So maybe it should remain a mystery. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I've been Drew, and I'll see you in the next one.
All right. I love the music, man. Oh boy. Anyways, guys, yeah. Well, I do hope you enjoyed this reaction. If you want to know what I do a lot of Elder Scrolls Let's Plays, but I'm kind of wanting to dabble it into you know, lore reaction videos and everything like that. Maybe I'll do it on stream. Who knows? But yeah. Or you know, just because I know there's like a lot of like what are they called? Drivers being not drivers being hot. Drivers being stupid. I think these are the ones, right? I don't know. I have to find them, but essentially I wanted to react to these things, right? Let's see. I'm sure like there's plenty of them, but yeah. Anyways, guys, I hope you all enjoyed, and if you did, leave a like, comment your thoughts down below, and subscribe to the channel. Also, I have a Discord, if you wanted to check it out and everything like that. And I'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, guys.